I'd like to introduce our speaker for the evening. Her name is Jenna, otherwise known as Pat's wife.
I'm Jenna, I'm an alcoholic. And I forgot my wedding ring, but I'm not a wife just yet. And also, I would like to say, Pat is my husband. I think that's who it is. So, my sobriety date is March 14th, 2018. So, yeah, a birthday here. If God can help me keep myself together for a few more days here, I'll be 4. Which truly blows my mind, because I spent 10 years trying to get a year, and I couldn't do it. And it never occurred to me that I'd be able to stay here. So even just that part of my life is beyond my wildest dreams. The fact that I'm still sober today is beyond anything I thought possible. I have a home group, which is the Broad Highway group, on Wednesday nights at 5:30. It's a great group. You guys should come out and see us. I have a sponsor who I love and adore, and she knows she's my sponsor and all that fun stuff. And I sponsor other women in this program. I say all that just because I hear other people say that, and it's a good intro, but also those are the things that I didn't do before that I make sure to do now. And I don't know all the things that do or don't keep me sober, but those are the things I do, and I'm still here, so I just keep doing them. And they seem to be important because they've secured a spot for me here. So I try not, my head will tell me that I don't need to do this, and I can sponsor less people, and I don't need this many meetings and all this stuff, but I've seen firsthand people, come in here and get the life that AA can give you, and then cash out. And I don't want to cash out. I tell people, we say don't leave before the miracle, but don't leave right after it either, because there's plenty more to come. That's been my experience anyway. I didn't believe a lot of the things I was told. I thought that there was a lot of scare tactics in AA, was what I thought. I thought that I came here and you guys were trying to scare me straight with these horror stories and the things. I remember just laughing at the story in the Big Book about the guy that, he starts to have trouble with alcohol, so he stops, and then he is awesome at business for 30 years, and then he retires successfully and then drinks himself to death. And I thought, that's insane. You're not really an alcoholic. And I really thought this. You're not really an alcoholic if you could stay sober 30 years. So I know people that have stayed sober that long. And I really thought, you'd take chips, and I was so confused. Hi, I'm so-and-so. I'm an alcoholic. I have 20 years. And I'm like, you haven't drank in 20 years. How are you an alcoholic? But to me, the problem was so concrete. It was alcohol. And if you took away the alcohol, then you should be fine. And I don't understand. There's been a lot of things in regards to alcoholism in general that I've had to, what's helped me, I think, this time around largely is just becoming okay with some mystery in my life and in the world. I'm a very practical kind of person. I like clear-cut directions. I like problems and solutions and step-by-step directions. And I don't like this whole, mystical, spiritual stuff. I like everything concrete and practical and just so. And I came across a lot of things that I didn't know how to explain. I tried really hard to figure out, and I just couldn't. And I think before I came to believe in a higher power, which was the very last thing to fall into place for me, because I tried to do the godless AA program, which doesn't work if you're trying it. I don't know. It didn't work for me. I guess that's all I can really say. The higher powerless program did not work for me. And I really wanted it to. But I had to, before I came to believe in a higher power, I really had to come to believe in alcoholism. I had to come to believe in the hopelessness and futility of my life as I was living it. And there was a lot to alcoholism that I thought was just scare tactics, and then I had to stick around a while and experience a lot of those things myself, or see them firsthand in people that I loved and cared about, to understand, oh my God, that's true, the stuff they say in those meetings is true. The warnings are real. This alcoholism thing is cunning, baffling, and powerful, and it is out to get me, and it's not a temporary thing. That was kind of one of the first few myths. Well, I guess it took some time to really debunk that myth. I thought that, when I guess, was struck, how it appeared to me was that I was just struck one day with alcoholism. There was like some huge power, like flipped the switch on my life as I knew it, and then I was in this permanent nightmare that I couldn't get out of, and there was no, I didn't see that I did anything wrong to get there. I just like woke up in this alternate reality that sucked, and I couldn't figure out what I did or how I got there. Because, you know, my history was that, in my youth, I didn't suffer any trauma. I had a pretty regular upbringing. Alcohol wasn't a priority to me in my teenage years. I cared a lot more about sports and grades and friends, and alcohol was just kind of like a thing that was there that we'd occasionally, you know, do on weekends, but it wasn't important to me in the slightest. And then, I don't know, the switch flipped, I got to college, and then it was the only thing that mattered. And I spent many a year trying to figure out what the thing was that happened and how to get back over that damn line, that invisible line, that I really didn't want to believe existed, because that makes no sense, right? That's not the practical thing, that there's this invisible line and you hop over it and there's no going back. But I can say today, I don't know how that works, but that's certainly true for me. I stepped over that line, and I never once again, I would have seasons, I guess, of my alcoholism where it would almost appear like it was becoming normal or close to normal, and then I would fall back in, and then I'd get the rug pulled out and I'd be drowning again. So there really wasn't any time where I made it back over the line safely. I just got over long enough to get duped, really was what happened. So by college, I think I stayed confused about my alcoholism for a long time, because I had a picture in my head of what alcoholism was, and I didn't feel like I fit it. I would go to meetings, you know, when I was in treatment, and people would talk about, like, I always had this feeling like I didn't belong everywhere I went, and I felt like a loner. And I would be going to meetings, and I'm like tuned in, like listening for the thing that's going to disqualify me as an alcoholic, right? Like that's what I'm here for. That's what I'm looking for, is to all the reasons that I don't fit in here and I don't need to be here, right? So if you're sitting in meetings or this meeting and you hear something that you're like, oh, that's not me, that must mean I'm not an alcoholic. I think it says a lot more about our disease as to what we look for, because we always find what we're looking for. When I sought to not fit in here, I didn't fit in here, and I got drunk. And that was what I wanted. That was what I was looking for. And now I'm here, and I cling to my seat here. And wouldn't you know it, I get to stay. So, yeah, so I was always tuned into the things that I felt like made me not an alcoholic. And one of them was that, like, I fit in everywhere. I was sociable. I had confidence. Everything was hunky-dory. I just, like, woke up in this nightmare, and that's what I'm trying to figure out, you know? But I don't have all these other issues that I feel like people came in with. And I was 19 or 20 when I first came into treatment, by way of an eating disorder and treatment for that, which, you know, that's irrelevant to alcoholism in a sense, but I did learn some practical skills for addiction in that. And I also, I remember that was my first experience with, like, the bewilderment of, like, loss of control, because I, like, went into this thing, like, intentionally thinking I was going to just do this for, like, attention, and then I was just going to, like, go about my life and stop that, and I suddenly just couldn't, and it was, like, terrifying to suddenly just be, like, out of control, because I was, like, a control freak, and to have this thing just swallow me was terrifying. I just remembered, like, the fear of that, and I would relive that with alcoholism over and over, that fear of, like, this is bad, and I cannot stop it, and where is this gonna end? So I was introduced to AA and rehab and stuff when I was, you know, not even of legal age to drink, and in my mind, it was an impossibility for someone 20 years of age to be an alcoholic. To me, an alcoholic was somebody who had lost their career, lost their family, lost their home, had the things and then lost the things. Like, I was just a girl at the #1 party school in the nation drinking a lot. And that was the story that I told myself. And in some regards, that was true, so I could believe it. But there was also, like, this lingering, deep-seated doubt of my own BS that like I was also, while I'm telling myself and other people that story, I just party too much, it's not a big deal, all this stuff, I'm also like lying to the liquor store clerk when I'm buying like jugs of vodka every day about like parties, and like, I feel the need to lie and defend and cover up and conceal the way that I drink. Like there was always this inherent shame that like other people don't drink like this, other people don't behave like this, and I should be ashamed of myself was the truth of like how I saw my relationship with alcohol. But outwardly, that's not what I would say. And I would get, so defensive of people. There were many calls from concerned roommates and friends in college to my family, and I lashed out so hard, just being defensive to those people who genuinely loved me and cared for me. And I put myself in their shoes now, because that's a newfound phenomenon in sobriety. I can put myself in someone else's shoes and see how they must have felt. And I can only imagine like the helplessness you must feel like watching someone who was once a capable person just self-destruct and deteriorate in front of your face, and like not be able to get them to see, I guess I have a taste of that now, having friends and things and family that's dealt with in and out of recovery. And it's not a fun place to be. So, but I would, I punished them for that concern and that care and that wanting to prevent the ultimate, train wreck that was impending, that they could see and I couldn't. And those are amends that some of them I've been able to make, and some are still on the list of, I long told myself that I wasn't hurting anybody if I was drinking alone, and I'm of age, all these things. I would always drink in such a way that I could tell myself I wasn't hurting anybody. Really, I was just being a closet alcoholic, but in my mind, I was doing it to prevent, any damage to you all. I'll just stay at home and get blackout drunk. But, you wake up, you do a 4-step, you see the worry on your family's face, and you're like, that's a lot of damage that I caused. My mother is a mother of 3 out of 4 of her kids are alcoholics and addicts. And we have all been on very different ends of that roller coaster. And I'm a mom now, and that thought just like keeps me awake at night, like the misery that must have caused. But I wasn't causing her any harm, because I wasn't stealing from her or lying to her necessarily or any of that stuff. I was just worrying her into an early grave. The anguish that must cause. So I was able to delude myself for a really good while there in my younger years. And then what happens, unfortunately, is all those things that you use to disqualify yourself from this program start to happen, and then you're no longer, you meet all the prerequisites, right? I grew up, I got friggin' old and was still drinking. And so what does that say? Guess you can be any age and be an alcoholic. I had to learn that one a decade later, You can come from any walk of life. You can have things and not have things. You can have the house and the farm and the man and the kid and whatever, and you can have nothing, and you can be sober or drunk. I really thought that alcoholism was conditional. And I didn't know what was wrong with me at all. I was mostly ashamed of drinking the way that I did with no real reason, right? I felt like I should at least have had some traumatic experience. So I was always going to therapists, right? I didn't want to go to AA. I would go to therapists and hope that they could like reveal some buried truth to me that I didn't even know. And then I could like be cured, and then I could go and drink how I wanted, like a normal person. And I went to like dozens of therapists, and like all of them were like, have you heard of AA? Because it sounds like, and I was like, damn it. You were supposed to be the alternative, but everybody knew. It's so funny. I was always the last to know. And so therapy never did a lick of good. And, trauma or no trauma, a bad upbringing or a good one, that's another mystery that I just kind of had to let go of. I don't know why we end up here or who. I don't know. I have no real idea. But I think I've at least made peace with the fact that like I'm okay that I ended up here. Like it seems like that's working out okay for me. My life is pretty damn good today. So if I had to go through all that and then get here and that was the big picture, like I can get on board with trusting whoever designed that, I think. Especially the way that my life is now. There's just been, I want to make sure I save time because I always like tell a lot of horror stories. And like what's been on my mind as I was driving here and everything, I just kept getting this message of like, talk about the miracles. Because like I have a lot of stories of just really wild stuff that's happened to me that I cannot explain. And all of it's been nothing that I've like maneuvered or planned or mapped out. And I often get asked, you know, like, what did you do different this time? Because I just kept coming back to AA and like just worn out. And when I came back this time, nothing was really different. I was every bit as beaten down as I always was. The bottom wasn't any worse or better. It was just kind of always the same old crap. Nothing really was different. I think I was just able to get out of my own way just long enough for God to like sneak in without me really noticing. And then good things started to happen, and so I became okay with like allowing that a little bit more and more, and then on it grew. And so really it was more just being willing to get out of my own way is like the only thing I can say that maybe I did, if I did anything to get to stay here so far. So yeah, I had the theory that alcoholism was like this conditional thing, that I didn't really have alcoholism, I just had a drinking problem that will get resolved once I grow up and like have a career and have a family and all these things. Then I won't drink like this. I'm just drinking like this because I don't have any like responsibility, you know. It's not hurting anybody, it's not a big deal, I'm young, whatever. I'll find my way and I'll grow out of this thing. And like I said, time went on, and then all those little bullet points kind of got crossed off. I did have relationships. I would find a man or a hostage. I always joke that it's like, I totally have a type. Pat's the only one that's not this type, which is a testament to how much I've grown. Is like the man that I am with is like night and day different from every man I ever sought prior. But I always found like the nicest guy that was a stand-up, sweet person that just unfortunately knew nothing about alcoholism and conveniently was so ignorant that they'd suggest things like, you should just drink on Fridays and Saturdays, or like, just drink some wine. Or I'm like, yeah, that's a good idea, you know? Those were the guys that I always sought, and that's a big amends. It's funny, sort of, but it's also not, that I victimized perfectly nice human beings and dragged them along through a horror show. I mean, the boyfriend that I had sophomore year of high school to the sophomore year of college, he is a big one because he got to fall in love with one person and then watch the slow unraveling into a total stranger, and like trying to figure out all those years how to like stop that process or get back or save me, and none of that worked. So there's been a lot of harm in relationships, and ultimately I checked that box too, that the man isn't going to fix it. The relationship isn't going to fix it, because I would get a perfectly good man and then I would still drink him away. And I would get a really good job and I would do well at that job, and then I'd drink that really good job away. So my sponsor helped me kind of understand that a lot when I got here this time, because I had a lot of trouble with the second half of step one, because I would get drunk and I'd look back and it's a total disaster, right? I can see that when I drink, life is a train wreck. It's a mess. It's definitely unmanageable. And then I get sober. I stop drinking. I put the drink down. And then I get 2 jobs. I make a lot of money. I make a lot of friends. I get a nice boyfriend. I do all these things, and everything's like copacetic. So I don't really know about that unmanageability part, if that really applies when I'm sober. And what she told me was like, okay, like you put the pieces together, but that same person doing things her way is still the one that picks up that drink and welcomes back that whole disaster that she just cleaned up. Like a sane person who knows how to manage life wouldn't do that. And that's you managing, that's what you bring about, is you get drunk again and then you do all this all over and life's a mess again. And if you had known how to manage and avoid that, you wouldn't be here, you know? And that's the truth. If I had been able to find any sort of easier way and do the right about face like it talks about and just straighten out, I mean, I was desperate. I would have done anything. I would have done it. I would have worked at it. And I did, really, essentially. I threw a lot of self-will at my alcoholism. 10 years does not go by. It didn't go by quickly. It felt like it took forever. And it was Groundhog Day over and over and over again. And all it was me like pulling myself up by the bootstraps. Like today, I'll figure out alcoholism and I'll figure out how to get out from under this damn thing, and I'll figure it out and I'll pick up the pieces, and I'm gonna do this thing. It was all me, and I, and there was not a God, and I really didn't care to like hear or talk about that because that didn't register. And I wasn't like of the atheist variety necessarily, or maybe agnostic. I just didn't think in that sense. So it wasn't like I was offended by the topic of God or a higher power. I didn't think myself capable of getting out of the self and the self-motivation and the self-will and all that stuff. I didn't think it was possible for me to ever step off of that and get on board with something else and tune into something else. That felt really far-fetched. And therefore, once I started to realize that maybe there wasn't a godless, no higher power way of doing the steps and staying sober, at least not that I had found, I kind of became more hopeless, honestly, because I would come here and I would like listen to speakers talk about how great their life is and like their connection to a higher power, and I would like be moved to tears because I'm so happy for you that you found that, but like also crushed because I don't think that that's remotely possible for me, because I'm different, right? Always different and always like less than. I thought everyone who stays sober has some sort of magical something that I am not going to be able to find because I haven't found it yet, right? 10 years of circling the drain, and if there was a God, you'd think he'd pull me up by now, and looking back, I can see the moments where I was thrown a lot of lifelines. A couple of cool stories about that. Well, the one that comes to mind right now is the last big hurrah when I had moved here. I basically chased my family here, and my daughter was 2, and her dad was moving here. His mom had bought them plane tickets because she was trying to spare them from me, and I just followed them down with the premise of like, I'll do treatment, I'll do whatever I have to do because I was desperate. And eventually I stayed sober like 6 months, and I was supposed to take a trip to Florida to visit my sister and her newborn son. And also my brother had flown from Wisconsin for spring break, and he had a newborn son. So I was supposed to meet 2 nephews and try to reconcile with siblings I've not been great to. Instead, what I did was got drunk on the plane the whole way with a 2-year-old in tow, and landed. And my mom, of course, was like, "Oh my God, how could you?" And, just the horror in her eyes and the disappointment, I think mother to mother, that like, I can't believe that you would do this with this kid. I'll never forget the look on that face. I've seen disappointment in my mother's eyes a lot, and my father's for sure, but like that look of just like, ooh, just total fear and shock at who I was as a mother too was really tough. And I didn't think I was gonna bounce back from that. So I just let her stay with my mom, and I proceeded to just get drunk in a hotel room. And this is what I would do. I would drink until like there was no more money, there was no place to go. I had a plane ticket from the other coast where I was supposed to see my brother, and he was like, "Don't come here." So I no longer was gonna go to the other coast to catch my flight home to my job that I don't have anymore, to my family who told me like one more time and they're done with me. So I was out of ideas and options. So I was scared to be alone because I'd almost drank myself to death a couple of times, totally accidentally, and I was terrified that that would happen. So I was just drunk and sobbing in a hotel lobby, and a guy came up and said, "Are you Jenna?" And I was like, "Oh my God, like this is so embarrassing, somebody knows me here." And I said, "Yeah, who are you?" And he's like, "Oh, you're Nikki's sister. She's in AA around here. I know your sister from AA. You're in AA." And he's like, as he's saying you're in AA, he's like figuring out that I'm very drunk and like a mess. And he's like, "Or you were in AA, or something happened." And basically he tried to, get me to go into detox and help me out. And I was like, I'm not going with some stranger. And what he said like gave me chills. He was like, there's no strangers in AA. And I was like, oh, okay. So I just went with this guy because frankly, I had no other options. But like, what are the odds? He worked at this hotel that I just by happenstance landed at drunk and without an option of how to get home, and ultimately went to detox and got on my feet. And I still talk to this guy. I call him my guardian angel because weird things like that would happen, right? Like somebody would come in out of nowhere and save the day. And it was never of my own, I had drank myself into the ground and something else fixed that, not me, not my self-will. It was a hard lesson to, I thought, okay, I tried the job, I tried the man, I tried all these different things, and I'm still getting drunk. I got pregnant with my first daughter when I was 28, and I thought, I was at first terrified, and then there was like this wave of relief because I thought, oh, thank God, like this will be the thing, I felt like at last, like the nightmare was going to be over and I would just be a mom now. Like I was an alcoholic mess before, and now I will be a mom and I'll be all these things that I saw myself being all along, and that worked for a minute. That's another one of those like cunning, baffling, and powerful things. I didn't drink while I was pregnant. I didn't drink for a time after, a few months, just nursing and whatever. But I eventually thought, okay, here's, I made a plan. I'm going to get a 9-to-5 job instead of the cocktail waitress thing I was doing before. I'll get a real girl, big girl job, and I will make dinner like a mommy, and I will put the baby to bed, and then I will have, a glass of wine or two, and that's what I will do. And then I did that for, I don't know, like 6 months, long enough for me to be like, oh my God, I wasted years in treatment and all this stuff thinking I'm an alcoholic, but clearly I'm not an alcoholic because, like, everything's still together. Like I have a house and a kid, and like I knew my sponsor was my sponsor when I heard her speak, and she talked about having that same just delusional thought of like, oh my God, I just fell into AA on accident and it was all a waste of time, and like I'm not an alcoholic after all, and like just the insanity of that. And when she said that, it was like, oh my God, I've had that thought a lot. And that all that thought is just you're about to be totally hoodwinked by alcoholism, because that's like, it waits for that moment when you're like, oh, this is behind me and like I'm good now. And then I got snatched up and the rug got pulled out, and I fell harder than I'd ever fallen before. And I was more crushed than ever before, because I had really truly hoped with all my heart, and I really believed, I wanted to believe so bad that a mother's love could cure alcoholism. I really thought, here's this kid and I'm a mom and all these beautiful things, and like this isn't the kind of person that I am, you know what I mean? There was like a huge, it was difficult to come to grips with who I was and to face that honesty. And mostly I didn't do that until I got sober this time. There was a lot of drinking those thoughts away. They would play on repeat, and there was not enough alcohol in the world that I could drink without dying that would make that tape stop playing. So it was like a boomerang. I thought that the having a baby and a family was the answer, and instead I thought it was showing me how terrible person I really was, and really what it was showing me was the power of alcoholism, and that no human power, that's what it means, no human power, not a baby, not a perfect, innocent, little perfect human being. No human power is gonna relieve my alcoholism. But I didn't see that at the time. All I thought was that I am a way shittier person than I ever imagined. Like I was, I couldn't believe who I was. When I had my daughter and was still drinking. And I drank harder than I ever drank before. And yeah, it brought me here that I almost lost her. And I thought, that'll be the last straw. And I think that was all that kept my my partner around, was just like, he didn't want that on his conscience. Like he should have walked away many, many, many times. But I think he knew I'd be dead and just didn't want to bear the weight of that. And that's the position that I put people in, right? Like my alcoholism is now your crippling problem to figure out and like lose sleep over and solve, like the selfishness of that. But when I got here, I didn't think I was selfish. I'm a nice person. I give people things. I donate to charity. I do all these things. But no, I'm so selfish that like I make people worry themselves sick and lose sleep and be completely distraught over my problems, because I don't want to take the time to like worry about them myself, So there were a lot of hard lessons there. That was a big one. And then I got here, and I still always, I guess, in addition to the I'll start a family and that will fix things, I always, like, I'm a hard worker. My dad was always like, the work ethic thing and like financial responsibility and all this stuff was like big. The value of $1. And so like work was always so important to me. And I realize now that I think I saw it as so important, because if I had a job, then I was okay. Like I couldn't be really that bad if I was still employed. And it was a facade, it it helped me convince myself of my delusion that everything was a-okay sort of if I was still employed. So I got here, and even though I said I was going to do treatment and all these things, I was like, well, but we also have like rent, and so I'll get a job and like I'll keep really busy with the job. That was always a working theory of mine, that like if I'm just busy enough, right? Like I just got to stay busy and I'll be fine. And I won't think about drinking. But that goes back to the whole like misappropriation of the problem. I was really confused when people would say that alcohol is not the problem. It was like, it's Alcoholics Anonymous. Like we tell drinking stories like this. It's about the drinking, right? It's about alcohol. That's what got me here. Without the alcohol, I'm fine. I really believed that. So it was really hard for me. I just thought a job and all these different things. If I just get the things, then I'll straighten out. And I think slowly, it took every bit of those 10 years for things to sink in. Because by the time I had gotten that dream job, I was still doing like the fringe AA. And like, I just knew, and like the pit, every day was the same, right? I felt exactly the same. Nothing had changed. I hadn't changed. I wasn't doing anything different. So why on earth would the same exact thing not repeat for the millionth time? So I'm just driving to work every day, like full of dread, just like waiting that the other shoe is going to drop any moment now. I don't know when, like a ticking time bomb, you know? Because I just knew. I think by then I knew that while I had hoped against hope that like a job would fix it, I'm driving to this job and I know like it's not fixing it. I have the job, right? And I'm still me. So maybe that's not the solution. And so this is all going to burn to the ground. And it did. I drank that job away in like epic fashion. And then of course, just like with my daughter, I was devastated. Like that was a one-time opportunity and I drank it away and I'll never recover from that, you know? And the financial insecurity. And I don't know, I have a good God story about that. The first job I landed when I moved here was working for a law office. And when they interviewed me, he asked a lot of curious questions about not AA literature, but you know the books that are on the side that people frequent, you know. And he was asking these things, and I knew all the answers. And he was like, "Have you ever have you ever had like family or anyone in AA?" And I was like, yeah, my sister, which was true, but I totally left off the table that like I'm a raging alcoholic. Yes, I know I've lived in AA in some form or fashion for 10 years. No, I didn't say any of that. I just acted like yeah, that's vaguely familiar. And so I worked there, and then like I always do, I drank. This is a different job that I drank away. I drank that job away, and he was like, but he told me that he was in AA and that his wife was in AA and that it's a great thing. It's like, oh, okay. And he's like, I told you all that. Why didn't you tell me then, you know? And I was like family with them. And he was like, ultimately, he's like, I read to the employers and I have to let you go. And I was like, okay. And I was crushed. And then I went and got that dream job, and then I drank that away. And the attorney called me back and said, I heard about what happened. Apparently it was like all over the news. It's Prescott News. Front page, extra. Jenna got way drunk at work and humiliated herself. So everybody heard, including my former boss, and he was like, maybe you can come in and talk to me, you know, about what's going on. And so I just poured my heart out to him, and we ended up talking. And fast forward, I guess 4 years now, 3-4 years, I've been working for him ever since. And to have an employer who's in AA and I'm his employer and I have a job to do, and that's all related and stuff. Never once is anything work-related more important than what's going on with me spiritually. And to be in that kind of environment is something else. And I know that that's the job that God wanted me to have, right? He didn't want me to have the big fancy job with the big paycheck, because that doesn't do anything for me spiritually. But where I'm at now, I might not make a whole boatload of money, but I am so loved and cared for and appreciated. And that's what God, I believe, that's why I circled back there somehow. I found my way back there. Because that was what God had lined up, and then I got in the way, and he was like, no, let's try that again. You're supposed to stay there. So that's another one of those stories. I guess what I have time for, I had a hard time with the whole, I talked about, you know, the management stuff and wanting to find my own way, figuring things out. And I guess I was probably like a year sober, and I was stunned that I'd made it a year, because I'd never done that. And I was like waiting for the sky to open up, like, oh my God, what happens now? Like, I actually stayed sober a year, like, holy crap. And nothing happened. Like a year and a day came, and then a year and 2 days, and I was like, oh, all right. And my sister, who, she has her own story, but in a nutshell, she was always, if you ask me, a very selfish person. She's a special type of person. But she had her story with alcoholism, and then she got sober in AA, and she became a completely different and wonderful person. And then she met a man in AA and got engaged, and they had a baby. And like I thought that was like the fairy tale, and you just ride off into the sunset now. And it can be, unless you pick back up. Unless you stop doing the things that we know to do in here that got you all that stuff. And so she went back out and lost her son. And I remember thinking, I had built her up in my head as like, this is the hero story of AA, is my sister, who's this person becomes this, and then she rides off into the sunset. And I was rocked that could happen. I'd been told, obviously, that can happen, and that happens all the time in AA. But that was the first like up close and personal, and that like shook me up. I had just had a second baby, I guess, at that time, or was about to, and it's been a lot of babies. It's all a blur. So yeah, it's been a busy few years. So I remember thinking, like, I don't feel like I'm doing half as much as she was doing spiritually and AA-wise and everything. And I just, like, got this sudden spark that, like, I just knew, like, I need to seek. I just need to, I don't need to figure it out. I just need to, like, go looking and look hard and don't stop and just get out of my own way. It was like this, all of a sudden it was clear, and I needed to, like, just go. And I got a different sponsor who I felt like could show me a different understanding of a higher power, or at least just help, like, hold my hand while I seek, because I really didn't even know how to begin. I didn't even know what that meant, that all of it was so abstract to me. And she's still my sponsor today, and there's been a lot of things that have happened in our family, and namely, this is a kind of part of the same God story. My dad, he had health problems for years and years and years, and he always beat them, right? Like, he had kidney failure, he got a transplant, he lived 10 years on that kidney, and then that one failed. And so it was like, we just became like desensitized, like, oh, he's got an organ failing, and then he'll be fine next week and whatever, because that was how he was. He was just like tough as nails. And he called me when I was a year and a half sober and was like, they're bringing in hospice, and so you have to come down here. And I just remember like sobbing, and I told him, like, I really can't, Dad. And he was like, what do you mean, work or something? And I was like, no, I just mean, like, I can't. I'm not built for, I don't even, like, this is rotten of me to say, but it's true. I, like, try to avoid funerals, because even when it's people I loved and cared about, because, like, I'm so codependent, and, like, the inability to fix that grief in people is painful to me. It's uncomfortable, and I hate it. And I'd never lost anybody sober, and I thought, oh, it's been such a good year and a half, and like now this, and like I don't know how to stay sober through like losing my dad. And like I totally got that dread. Like I thought that was gonna be the end of the story. And I don't know, my sponsor was like, just pray, just bring God. And like, I don't even know, I didn't do anything. I really didn't. I went on the plane full of dread and panic and fear and grief and just a ball of like emotion and chaos. And I landed, and my brother needed help in arranging things with my dad, and his wife was a mess. And so I just, helped her and helped him. And like, I guess that's what's always worked in my sobriety. If I just stop thinking about how I feel and I just help you with whatever's going on with you, big or small, I stop feeling that way, and like I get through it. And so what that allowed me to do was I got to hold my dad's hand while he passed away, which is something that sounded terrifying to me prior. I don't want to be there for that, but I got to be in this like total God moment. Like, I don't know how to put it into words, but just like the full 100% knowledge that there was something, and that it was there, and everything was going to be okay for me, him. Like, I know it sounds like, I don't know, happy nonsense, but it was just a knowing, like a deep knowing. And like I could see it in his face too. I had gotten the look of disapproval and disappointment from my father many, many times. He was always saying, like, he didn't understand alcoholism. And he would always say, you're a straight A student, and blah, 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 varsity soccer player, all these things, and you work so hard. And like, why can't you just put a goddamn drink down, Like, why are you, like, kind of like, why are you such an idiot when it comes to alcohol? And it was like, I don't know, like if I knew, certainly I would use all those wits you tell me I have, and I'd sort it out, I'd fix it. But But I didn't see that look on him that day. He had like total peace. I don't know, it was like a look that I've never seen. He just had total peace and like pride, I guess, which was like all I longed for from my father all my life. And I got it in that moment. And like, I don't know, I truly, to this day, I look back on that whole weekend that I was there, and I just don't even, I know that that was all God, because I don't know how to do any of that stuff. I'm not built for any of that stuff, but I was able to show up and be a sister. And I went from being like uninvited to family parties and don't come to my wedding, that kind of thing, to like, Dad's dying and we need you. Like, can you help? And like actually being able to be depended upon in that way was really moving. So I don't know. It was like all these God stories in my story. Some of them are real happy and some feel like they should be sad. But like, I think that's like the highlight of my sobriety, was like that I forever get that moment. And like, if you want a black and white comparison of like what it would look like if I were drinking, I unfortunately had that because my sister was still out when he passed away, and they had had a really bad fight like a month or two before he even got sick, and said some really hurtful things to him, and then she wound up in jail. And so she couldn't say goodbye to him. She couldn't say sorry. And like, it hurts me because like that's the kind of thing that happened to me all the time. That very well could have been me. And I have no idea why it's not. That's another huge mystery. I have no idea why I got to be there and have that memory in that moment, and why she doesn't. I just hope that that's a part of her story that gets her where she needs to be, because I have a lot of painful parts of my story too that I look back and it's like I needed that. I wouldn't have known otherwise, I couldn't have been told. There's a lot of things that people try to tell me to spare me from the pain, and I couldn't be told. I had to go through it and then see, oh crap, they were right, That's true about alcoholism. That's true about me. But there's been a lot of rosy things too. I'm not trying to say, like, I always hesitate to even talk about this because I don't want anyone to think like I'm promoting that you get sober and like then you get like wealth and success, because like that's not been my path at all. But I had a really big problem with financial insecurity, in that I worried a lot about, my dad was always so worried about money, and so that kind of rubbed off on me, and I was always stressed about money. And I carried that through. I didn't let go of that for a couple years into sobriety, and I was really upset and worried about, I'd left my ex and was trying to move into a place, and I was losing like $600 a month of hard-earned, penny-pinched, penny-squeezed savings from years, of eking by, just trying to maintain all that. And she was like, well, have you let that go to your higher power? And it's like, no, I don't think God like deals in those things. And what I'd been saving for was that I needed a massive amount of dental work, and I was saving to, I guess, go to Mexico just to cut the cost down in half, but still tens of thousands of dollars. And she's like, just let it go. And I didn't really believe that God would do anything for me on that front. I just let it go because the pain of hanging on to it and trying to manage and control it and stressing every dime that I spent was tearing me apart and ruining my life, and I just didn't want to do it anymore. So I finally did. I said a really long prayer one night, and I let it go, and I instantly felt relief. And like the next day, I thought about money less, and I didn't worry so hard, and I had a little more feeling every day that everything was going to be okay. And then I got a call like a week later, maybe a week and a half, 2 weeks later, saying like, oh, you entered some contest for like this giveaway for all this dental work, and do you remember? And I was like, I totally didn't remember. I know that I did, but I did it in like this desperate state of like, I'll never be able to afford anything ever, and like, why do I save? And like, I'll just, like just a total, I'll toss my name in the hat, it'll never happen. Those things don't happen to me. I'm the most unlucky person. I've never won a raffle, anything, like in the history of time. And they said, yeah, you're a finalist and you should come down. And it was like, oh my God, okay. And so fast forward, I ended up winning some contest where this thing that I had obsessed and saved money and was a wreck for years, obsessed about trying to figure out how to save the money and make it happen, just got taken care of for me. Just taken care of. And it didn't happen a moment sooner than like the week before I gave it up after years of trying to manage and control that myself. And I realize now that that's like a metaphor for step 3 in my life, is that like me of my own accord with my own abilities and all my self-knowledge and all that stuff and all my self-will and energy and all those things will never amount to a morsel of what God can do if I just let him, you know? And that has been true. I wish I had more time, but that's the moral of the story. Stay here. Don't leave before the miracle. And then once you get the miracle, stay for the hundreds others that are coming down the pipe, because that's been true for me. So I hope you all stay. Thanks for letting me share.